Well, Lindsay Wagner, it's really nice to be chatting with you and to be zooming into your Palm Springs home.
Hi.
Now, I know a lot of your fans recognise the fact that you began your showbiz life as a model, but maybe not too many know that you were actually 9 years old when you made your modelling debut. In fact, it was on the cover of an LP titled Introduction to Piano in 1958. How did you land that very first modelling job? Were your parents somehow involved in showbiz?
No, not my parents, my uncle. He was the art director for Capitol Records. And so he was responsible for all of the album covers, did many, many, many of them. And they needed a little girl for this idea that he had. And of course, I was right there. So I got that job through him. I didn't start modeling with other people until I was 12. My uncle Ed, he was actually hired away by Frank Sinatra when Frank started his own record label, Reprieve, which was kind of under the umbrella of Warner Brothers, but it was his music subsequently came out of there, and my uncle did all of his album covers and all that stuff. So the old, that old Blue Eyes is Back. Remember that
Yes.
campaign? Yeah, that was my uncle's idea and stuff. I mean, he was really a special creative guy.
Introduction to Piano wasn't the only album cover that you graced. I note in the 60s, you were the letter D. You see, I do my research for the Night's Hot Rod High album.
You do. Yeah, that was it. I was actually a backup singer for him. The girls in that picture, we were the backup singers for him.
Now, I read somewhere that you babysat for actor James Best's kids. Of course, James, for those who maybe don't remember, was the bumbling Sheriff Coltrane in The Dukes of Hazzard. And the story suggested he recommended that you consider a career in acting. Is that right, or is that wrong?
Yes, it's a little of both. Again, for whatever reason, the year of me being 12, a lot of things happened. I met Nina Blanchard, who was starting this new agency, which just blossomed. And she was pulling in really wonderful, successful models already away from the bigger agencies, even this wonderful boutique she was building. And I was one of them. And at that same year, these friends of my parents' friends was James Best and his wife Joby at the time. James was a wonderful actor, which about. James became famous from the Dukes of Hazzard.
Yes.
He was the goofy sheriff, right? But he was a wonderful dramatic actor, and he was an even better acting coach. He coached people like Clint Eastwood and oh God, I can't think of all the names. I didn't know anything about that. I wasn't even interested in acting. I liked singing. I thought maybe I would want to sing. I didn't know, but I was so young. I was like not planning my life at that time. I was 12. As I was working for James and Joby, she was ballerina. They offered for me to come take dance lessons. I mean, in those days, that's what you think, right? A little girl, you give her dance lessons.
Yeah.
And I grew up quite dyslexic, and the real classic kind of dyslexia where you have reversals and maybe a tracking problem. And I had an unusually high IQ, but I couldn't read. Got in there and I could do all the moves and the poses and everything that was done for ballet. I could not remember 2 of these, 3 of these, pirouette, do 4 of these, come back over here. It was the sequencing, because that was the problem that I can say today. And when I got older and figured out, when people were figuring out what this kind of a thing was that human beings had, prior to that, they just thought you were stupid, or you wouldn't pay attention, or weren't working hard enough. I mean, that's the kind of attitude that I grew up with. And so let's change them. Let me bring her into my class. And I thought, when he said acting class, I mean, I was expecting to see beginners and whatever. I go in and there's Ketty Lester and I don't remember who else, Roger Davis, who was in a big series at the time. And that's when Jimmy told me, I would love to see you wait and not do anything until you grow up, get to know yourself well, get to the point where you feel you have at least one foot strongly on the ground. He said, when you're ready, that's when you should go and start acting professionally. And I said, well, how will I know? I mean, how will I know when I'm ready? I don't know. He said, you'll know. You have learned to listen to yourself. You've learned to express yourself. You've learned to find things and places in yourself. Just start listening to yourself more, listening to your intuition, and you'll know. And it wasn't until I was 22. So I woke up one morning, literally woke up and just went, I'm ready. It was like somebody rang a bell in me. I thought, I think I'm ready. Monique James was the woman who was the head of the contract players. I get a call from her office saying, would you please come in and see us? And I called David, my agent, right away going, what does that mean? Who is she? What do I? He said, go. He said, we'll see. They might want to put you under contract. And that's exactly what happened.
There you were one day in bed saying, I'm ready now. Then you wind up with an agent, all of this kind of just falling into places James Best had predicted it likely would. Then you sign with Universal in 1971. And then you wind up, it's kind of like a blur, isn't it? You wind up doing Adam 12 and you wind up doing the Rockford Files and so many other of those great shows of the day.
I didn't stop working. I did 13 shows in a row, boom, boom, boom. And then Robert Wise came in and basically hired me to do 2 people. I don't know if you saw it or not, but it was
with Peter Fonda and Estelle Parsons. Yes, that's right. Wonderful movie.
Nobody could touch the issue of Vietnam in Hollywood at the time. Nobody. He was so big by that, he was the Spielberg of the previous generation, if you will. Robert Wise. That movie, I was very excited, starring in my first motion picture. I was super cool. 2 weeks after it came out, the POWs came home and people were literally pelting the theater with tomatoes and, classic old school eggs, pelting the theater. So angry that we would even talk about that he wasn't the devil, So it was really tough. So my first motion picture went on the shelf 2 weeks later.
Yeah.
And
had a whole pile of controversy around it. But now when you look back on it, Lindsay, you realize that to be able to tell honest, true stories and not just pump out propaganda is a whole different thing, isn't it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So that was cool. And then right from there, I went into doing The Paper Chase.
With Timothy Bottoms.
Yeah.
And that was a comedy, so that was a whole different level to 2 people. And then you think about some of those great shows, as I said, Adam 12, you did 5 episodes of Marcus Welby, MD, James Garner in the Rockford Files. You two seem to have this amazing chemistry. It was almost like he was a bit of a father figure to you.
He was too cute to be my father. He would be talking about something before a shot. And we'd be standing there waiting. And me, I'm like, you need to stay kind of calm and focus. But he's blah, 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 telling a joke over to the grips that are holding up that thing over here. And we're standing here. And I'm trying to, and I can't help but listen to him. But at the same time, I'm trying to be quiet. And so a couple of times I'd walk off and go behind a flat or something just to get myself focused and come back out. And then they'd finally say, okay, places, everybody, blah, blah, blah. Ready, and that's when he'd stop talking. He would stop talking, turn around, and they'd say action. He'd start his line, just go right into the thing, and it was impeccable. He was in the attitude he needed to be. He was delightful. And they'd say cut, and he'd go, so what she said was, and then he goes off talking to the grips again. It was, he had such concentration and focus that it was just lightning fast.
Yeah,
it was great.
I bet for you it was like a masterclass to see somebody working like that and probably put you in good stead. I read a beautiful story, Lindsay, about James Garner and you, in that at that point in time, apparently you didn't own a television. And he said, now listen, Lindsay, if you're going to be in this biz, you need a television. And he bought you one.
Yes, he showed up at my house. I didn't know he was going to do it. He showed up at my house and this big knock on the door, and I opened the door and there's this massive box in front of me. And I'm going, what can I help you? I think you're at the wrong house, whatever. and he just starts moving in. I still can't see him. I don't have any idea who it is. This monster box walking into my house. And finally, when he turns the corner, and that's when he said, "You have to have a television, but you're going to be in this." And he sets it all up, and it was pretty cool.
Another interesting little part of your early life was Hugh Hefner and his After Dark show, which, for those who don't know, it is not at all what you think, because legends of the day appeared on this show, like Sonny and Cher and Vic Damone, and you name it, they were all there. And he did these extraordinary interviews, and it was a showcase for whatever talent they might have, singing, acting, whatever. And you were one of the party guests in an episode. That must have been a bit surreal.
Yeah, well, it was kind of cool. What they did was, when they started that show, they wanted pretty people as their background for the show, as the guests at the party. And so they hired models from model agencies. Most of us were from legit model agencies. The only thing that was uncomfortable was the freaking skirts that were about this big.
Yes, like a bit of dental floss.
Yeah. That was not necessarily the fun part.
No. Lindsay, a lot of people think that your long association with Lee Majors began, of course, with the $6 Million Man. But you know what? In 1971, you first worked with Lee in a TV series called Owen Marshall, Counselor at Law. He was in the show, you were in the show, and that, I guess, marks the first time that you were in a series together.
Funny thing was that I just didn't know. My career was going so fast. I mean, from that just as quickly as it began, one show after another. I had done 13 shows within maybe 4 months, 5 months. And so point being that when I ended up working with him on Bionic, I didn't remember that even. And I didn't remember that he was the person that I worked with in that thing. I was just spinning and meeting these people and doing that. Oh, these actors. And because I never watched TV either, as the story tells.
Until James Garner came into your apartment with a big box with the television in it.
Yeah, that was an interesting.
So look, to the $6 Million Man, and of course your Jamie Summers character was created as a guest role, the girlfriend for Lee Majors' Colonel Steve Austin, and she was a tennis star, critically injured in a skydiving accident, that we know. And then, as the story goes, she died because the bionics she was given were rejected. And as I understand it, Lindsay, there was a huge outcry from fans because they love that dynamic, that incredible chemistry, and it is undeniable that your character and his character had. And so, bingo, essentially, the Bionic Woman was born as a spin-off, and Jamie Summers was brought back from the dead, as only television can do it.
I used to say I'm the only person other than Charlton Heston now that's been resurrected on national television. So I felt like I was in good company.
But thinking about it, Lindsay, and this is very true, you scratched beneath the surface of the Bionic Woman. That show was a groundbreaker. It was a trailblazer because it was the first time an empowered woman had starred in that style of sci-fi primetime show, right? And you had a lot of input into the dynamics of the Bionic Woman. It wasn't about physically beating up the baddies. It was about problem solving. It was about inclusiveness. And that's, I think, what made the show so compellingly different from all the rest that was coming on that had gone before it.
And that was very intentional. At the time I got that part, or I was asked to do it, literally I was asked to do it. I didn't have to go try out for it or anything, but I was teaching on my off time, teaching acting at a private school, a little private school that didn't have money for arts classes. I didn't really want to do the show. Actually, when I got offered to do it, they were getting ready to start integrating my character on the Rockford Files as a regular at the time. So I was happy with that. But then this show came in, and it was already huge because Lee was very well known at that time. So in teaching those kids, my girlfriend, my best friend, we felt a lot alike about so many things. And, spiritually, everything, it's just, she was my sister and knew me very well. And I said, I don't know that I want to do this show. I mean, it's big, popular, I guess. And I said, it's sci-fi. And they're jumping off of buildings and they're like doing all these absurd things. And I want to do this business. I want to tell stories that help people. That's the kind of thing I want to do. And I don't see that in this. And she said, Lindsay, think about it. This is your dream actually come true. You love kids. This is a show for kids. This is a show that is sci-fi. And what can you do in sci-fi? You can say whatever you want in sci-fi.
Yes.
And you just need to have some contractual power to be able to help guide the stories, to take the strength, the physical strength, and use it as a metaphor for internal strength. That's what I wanted to have them write in the stories. Subtle little things, but they're things that affect people when they're watching something, whether they know it or not, and especially kids. They suck it all up. And so she said, that's what you could do. Just talk to your lawyer and see if you can get some kind of rights as far as collaborating. And we did. And so I did. I said, okay, let's give this a go. This gave the writers an opportunity to imagine new things. How do I resolve this with a woman? How do I resolve this with a woman who has the power to do something, but maybe not necessarily the internal, not ability, but the internal propensity to just go, boom, boom, it's done, because men already are given permission to think like that. They're even groomed like that, even for men who maybe would not want to be that much that way.
But the show was universally loved, Lindsay. I mean, that must have felt good to think that literally in every corner of the globe, it was loved. Those messages were resonating, and not just by women who, of course, thought, yes, finally a strong and very inspiring leading lady in this kind of show, which basically until then had not been seen before. But I love this dynamic too, also by men who secretly love watching that show, and they'd tell their buddies, oh, I'm watching sport. But they really weren't. They were watching the Bionic Woman. And those messages were getting through. They were penetrating. They were seeing it in a totally different dynamic.
I noticed an interesting thing while doing Comic-Cons, that the demographic that grew up on Bionic, the women started telling me their internal stories because they were old enough to understand how the show had affected them. And in their 30s, the early 30s, the women started telling me their stories and what it meant to them because they could articulate it now. And when the demographic got to be in their 40s is when men started telling me. It was interesting. It's like it took them like another little decade there to be able to just come right out and say, the heck with it, man. I loved it. Just what you said. Just what you said. They would say, I used to tell my boyfriends that that I had to go home and take care of my sister tonight, so I can't play. And I was doing it so I could watch the Bionic Woman with her. And but they're very open now. They're in their 40s and changing life. Yeah.
You did a lot of your own stunts in the Bionic Woman, and there must have been moments where you thought, oh gosh, am I getting in a little too deep? I mean, on paper, that stunt kind of looked okay. But in reality, did you ever find yourself in a situation where it was a little bit hairy or a bit tricky or far tougher than you thought it would be?
Like that, to be honest with you, one of the worst ones was when they decided to change what the prop was that I was supposed to break with my hand, the breakaway stuff. And until it gets completely dried, it's hard and it doesn't want to break apart. And at one point, when just worked it out, oh, that did not break. Did my hand break? It didn't break, but it felt like it might have. Oh, well, you know what? Then there was this helicopter. You trying to get me to talk about a helicopter?
Yeah, off you go.
I did an episode once where the bad guys make an escape from the top of a hotel on a helicopter. And Jamie comes running up, and as they're lifting off the ground, she grabs a hold of the skid, and they take off, and they try to shake her off the skid and drop her in the city of Las Vegas. And of course, she's too strong. They can't shake her off, and she ultimately gets up and takes care of the boys and gets rid of the problem. And they had already rigged up my stunt double to go around the city tethered to the helicopter, and while the helicopter was shaking her and getting those shots. So then they came back, we broke for a late lunch. Now we had to get some close-ups. I thought we were finished with it, but they say now we need some close-up here. So we're going to take you up about 4 feet off of the airbag, and then get a couple of shots of you, and then a drop. And I said, oh, well, okay. He said, well, you know, you've jumped out whole 1-story jumps before, and that it's not even probably going to even be that far off the airbag. Okay, fine. So I'm looking around for the rigger who rigs you up to these tethers that they have, and for safety belts, and they said, you know what, we don't have time, because what's happening is the wind's starting to come up and the sun's going down. So we got to get these. What do you mean you don't have time? You mean you're not going to time it? Okay, fine. And I just said, okay, fine. Big mistake.
Yes.
So they took it up, and my heart started to pound already. And I grabbed a hold of it. And just about that time, that's exactly what happened, was the wind picked up. If you think about it, a big, tall building, when a strong wind, like they have all the time in Las Vegas, it hits the top of the building, it hits, and the wind down here goes choo, and it curls over. It goes across the top. So it's very windy up there on the flat. So the helicopter, in order to avoid the wind hitting the side of the helicopter and moving him out of position, trying to stay over the airbag, had to go higher. Meanwhile, I'm watching the airbag like this, like, oh my God. And it's, where is it going to land? So he went up even higher to miss the wind, and finally found a dry, kind of a spot where it was easier. And so then they said, okay, now go, we got the shots we needed. And I heard him, but my hands didn't hear him. My hands would not go. They would not let go. It was like they belonged to somebody else. And I'm talking to my hands. Now I'm swearing to my hands. And it was just unbelievable. I can't even describe the feeling.
You couldn't let go.
No, I couldn't let go. And they're yelling at me to let go from the cabin of the helicopter. And so anyway, somehow I finally let go. I don't even remember letting go finally.
Why did the show end, Lindsay? It seemed so popular, as I say, all over the world. Why did it end when it did? Was that your decision?
No, not at all. There was an executive who came on to ABC when my show was just beginning. Lee's show had already been there and been a success, but he wanted everything, because he had come on new. He wanted everything on the network to be his creations, and he didn't create any of this. So he was trying to get rid of it. But he couldn't, because the ratings were just too good. And so little by little, there was negative press going out about how the ratings were going down on my shows and Lee's shows and everything, trying to get people to think it's not good anymore.
Essentially, it was a classic case of white-handing, wasn't it? He wanted to put his imprimatur on everything and basically swept out those that were not part of his agenda.
Yes, he was successful about trying to convince enough people that our ratings had gone down. However, the only people that knew about the actual ratings were the other networks, and there were only two other. So NBC saw that, knew what the ratings were, that they were still high and wonderful. So NBC said, come here, we want to do the show over here. So then we went to NBC and started the show over there. That was the third season. However, NBC was in a lot of trouble, and they were trying to recreate their staff in a way that they felt would be better for them. So they gathered up a bunch of money and hired that same guy away from ABC, brought him to NBC so that he could, because he was good at what he did, and have him help them with their network. And the first thing he did before he did anything else was say, get that show out of here. Oh. So I was fired twice by the same guy on the same show. And yeah, that was pretty
Oh wow. I mean, that's extraordinary. What was that level of fame like? Was it completely overwhelming for you? Because I just get the sense that you're somebody who doesn't kind of really feel comfortable in that public domain where you're forced to share a whole lot of yourself. That must have been extraordinary. And then you got the tabloids and the paparazzi and all of those extraordinary things going on at the same time.
Yes and yes.
And yes and yes.
Yeah, it was pretty amazing. I was having a hard time with it for a while, but one of the things that I came to terms with was, first of all, that it wasn't going to go away, and two, that I had to be okay taking care of myself in the face of what other people wanted, to recognize that nobody wanted to be rude, nobody wanted to make my evening with my family unpleasant because they're bugging us or whatever. They're just not thinking, and they're excited, and they just don't think. They just kind of go unconscious. And if they really sat and thought about it, they would say, "Oh wow, did I do that?" And because that's happened. But so instead of saying, whenever somebody came up to me, would you sign this, please? I don't want to stop and sign something. I really don't. That's what Lindsay really wants and needs right now for myself. And so I found ways to respond to them that were, to me, compassionate, but I just don't want to stop and do that. And I'll say, no, can we just have a handshake? Is that okay? Thank you. I'm really in a hurry. Or, I'm sitting here with my family. I said, can we just say nice to meet you? And everybody, just find ways so that I'm not saying, get out of here, can't you see that I'm doing that? That's not me, So, and once I started doing that, people, they just like, they wake up as soon as I come from my truth and and compassionately, I guess you would say, set a boundary for myself. And I only had twice in the whole, all these years, only twice that has there ever been anybody that wasn't like that. There was a guy, he was 55 if he was a day. And he says, here, walks up with a pen and a photo. Here, sign this, he says. And I said, first of all, the attitude kind of ticked me off to begin with. I was like, yes. Calm down, girl. and so, and I went, I'm not, I'm in a hurry. I'm just, so you definitely have a right to walk away from this. He says, no, come on, seriously, sign this. And he said, it's for my son. It's for my son. And now he was probably, like I said, 55 max. And I said, fine, I thought, just do it and get out of here. Because if he's going to keep bugging me, it's going to take longer. So I said, fine, what's your name? And he said, make it out to Dr. Max. So it was for him, right? So that was one time, and the other time that was a little over the top, although I wonder if that person ever really thought about it later after that happened. I was at a banquet, a formal banquet, and I was in the ladies' room, and I was behind the stall doing my business, minding my own business, and a hand and a piece of paper and a pen came under the stall door, and Miss Wagner, and I like, my God, are you serious? And all of a sudden, this devil jumped up on my shoulder on this side. And it's like Jiminy Cricket, my conscience jumped up on this side. And the devil's saying, give her some DNA on that paper. And I was like, and so it was like, no, behave yourself. Just tell her to wait a minute. And then over here is going, blah, 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 blah. So I sat there arguing with myself for a minute. Finally, I said, can you wait until I come out, please? That would be very nice. Oh, yeah, okay. So there are times.
Oh, Lindsay, I mean, you hear about those stories, but you, no matter in what mind you're in, you don't for the life of you think they're true. Fancy that you're in the stall and a bit of paper and a pen comes sailing under the divider. Incredible. You and Lee Majors, of course, have remained great friends over the years. I mean, beyond the $6 Million Man and the Bionic Woman, where it all kind of crossed over, there were those 3 telly movies. You finally got married in an episode that was just beautiful. You starred in an episode of The Fall Guy with Lee. And then in 2017, you starred in a wonderful TV movie together, Eat, Play, Love. Obviously, you do have some kind of fabulous chemistry together and are just great friends.
Well, by that time we were friends. We weren't friends during the series. We didn't become friends until actually the very beginning of the DVD releases. The big celebration was in Italy. And so he was there with his wife, I had my kids, and we spent nice times together doing PR and whatnot. And that's when we really got to be friends. I mean, it started a little bit maybe when we were doing the reunion movies, but still, this was just social time. So we got to know each other that way. And then subsequently, I did an event in Texas where they were living at the time, and went out to dinner and just realized we started developing a friendship.
Lindsay, I note that in 1988 you did an episode of the new Alfred Hitchcock Presents. Of course, the great Alfred Hitchcock, he passed away, I think it was 1980. I'm wondering, because you're so intuitive and such an interesting person with such high intelligence, that's obvious. Did you kind of feel him around? Was he there on the set, even though he couldn't possibly have been because he'd passed away? In other words, did you feel his energy there?
Honestly, I have no idea. I had an 18-month-old baby nursing. I was so just get into my part and doing what I had to do. That may have happened if I wasn't in that circumstance with that. It has happened to me with other things, because I did a lot of stories that were real stories about real people. When I did I Want to Live.
Oh, yes.
That was a deep experience for me in the way that you're referring to. And yeah, that was pretty interesting to have the sense of really what she went through, being innocent and having that result.
Or the death sentence, that's right.
Yeah, it was. I think she was the first woman to ever be executed in California.
You're somebody with so many incredible dimensions. You're fascinating to talk with. You've got 2 sons. I'm wondering, are they in the biz of show, or are they doing something completely different?
Yeah, no, they're stuntmen, both of them. They're very tall and slender, so they play a lot of creatures, and they do creature and suit work.
Yes.
As well, because body language also. You're playing a creature, you don't walk around like a regular human. So
Lindsay, it's been really nice chatting with you. It really has.
Thank you. It's nice to work with somebody who's done their homework.
You travel really safely and enjoy your time in Australia.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.